Hello everyone and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Marcus Kowalski, and I need to tell you what happened at Wonder Lake before someone else goes out there and doesn't come back. I've been a ranger with the National Park Service for 17 years. 12 of those years have been right here at Denali, deep in the Alaskan wilderness, where most people will never set foot. I transferred up from the lower 48 after my divorce needed space, needed silence, needed something bigger than my problems. The Army taught me how to survive in cold weather, but Alaska taught me how to respect it. People think ranger work is about campfire songs and bear safety talks. Sometimes it is. But when you're stationed at Wonder Lake, 85 miles from the park entrance and 150 miles from the nearest real town, the job gets more serious. I'm certified in high-altitude search and rescue. I've pulled people off mountains, found lost hikers, and recovered bodies that stayed frozen until spring thaw. In 20 years of living in Alaska, I thought I'd seen everything the wilderness could throw at me. I was wrong. February is the hardest month up here. The temperature hits 40 below on a warm day. We get maybe 6 hours of weak daylight, and the rest is darkness so complete you can feel it pressing against your eyes. The aurora dances overhead most nights, beautiful and eerie, making the ice fields glow green and purple. Wind cuts across the tundra at 60 miles per hour during storms, and the nearest backup is 12 hours away on a good day. This is why the ground stays frozen year-round. Permafrost runs hundreds of feet deep. You can't dig graves here. Bodies either get flown out or they wait until spring, preserved like everything else. I'm telling you this so you understand. I'm not some tourist who got spooked by a moose. I know this land. I know cold and dark and isolation. I know the difference between dangerous and deadly. And I know the old stories, the Athabaskan legends about ice demons, the tales Inuit elders tell about the Tornarsuk, the great polar spirits that hunt men who disrespect the frozen places. I never believed those stories. Not until February 1987, when Dr. James Morrison's research team stopped answering their radio. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. Park headquarters in Fairbanks, crackling through static. "Marcus, we've got a situation." University of Alaska research team, 4 scientists studying permafrost changes near the Muldrow Glacier. They missed their scheduled check-in yesterday. Missed it again this morning. I pulled on my thermal layers and grabbed my gear. Military-issue cold weather clothing, emergency shelter rated to 60 below, satellite beacon, first aid kit, and my .44 Magnum, not because I expected trouble from people, but because polar bears sometimes wander down from the north, and a charging bear doesn't care about your credentials. When was their last contact, I asked? More static. Then, Sunday night, the lead researcher, Morrison, reported unusual findings. Said they'd documented something, a pause. He said they'd seen a massive humanoid figure walking across the lake ice. Then the transmission cut out. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. And it wasn't just the weather. "Probably a bear standing on its hind legs," I said. "Happens all the time. Tourists always think they've seen Bigfoot." That's what we figured. But Marcus, they're 4 days overdue now. And there's a storm coming in tonight. I filed my SAR-1 form, checked the weather data, and planned my search grid. 3 days of supplies, standard protocol. I've done this 200 times before. Find the camp, find the people, bring them home. Simple. The snowmobile ride out to Wonder Lake took 6 hours. The landscape is beautiful in a way that makes you feel small, endless white tundra, mountains like broken teeth against the sky, and silence so deep you can hear your own heartbeat. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe, even through my face mask. My GPS marked the research camp's last known location, 3 miles past the lake, near the base of the glacier. I found their camp just before sunset. Everything was exactly where it should be. 3 tents, properly staked and secured. Equipment organized and covered. The snowmobiles were lined up, fuel tanks full. I checked the food supplies all there, frozen solid, untouched. No signs of bear intrusion, no signs of struggle, no signs of anything wrong at all. Except the people were gone. All 4 of them had simply vanished. I searched the camp methodically, the way I'd been trained. Started with the largest tent, the one they'd been using as a lab and living space. The door flap was sealed shut, ice crystals forming around the zipper. Inside, sleeping bags lay neatly rolled. A propane heater sat cold and unused. Research equipment covered a folding table. Laptops, sample containers, notebooks. I picked up one of the notebooks. Dr. Morrison's handwriting, neat and precise. Asterisk. Day 12. Temperature readings continue to show anomalies. Recorded negative 47 degrees Fahrenheit in camp, but ice samples from the lake indicate localized zones reaching negative 70 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. This shouldn't be possible with current atmospheric conditions. Chen thinks the equipment is malfunctioning. I'm not so sure. Asterisk. I flipped forward. Asterisk. Day 14. Found tracks this morning. Large, very large. Stride length suggests something over 12 feet tall. Humanoid shape, but the depth of impression indicates enormous weight. The tracks were pressed into solid ice, not snow. I've never seen anything like it. Asterisk. Asterisk. Day 15. We all saw it tonight, walking across the frozen lake, moving against the wind. It shouldn't be possible to move that way too smooth, too fast. Elena wants to approach it tomorrow. I told her, absolutely not. Whatever it is, it doesn't belong to any animal I've ever studied. Asterisk. Asterisk. Day 16. The temperature drops 20 degrees whenever it comes near. Our instruments go crazy, compasses spinning, GPS giving false coordinates. It's as if the thing warps reality around itself. I know how this sounds. I'm a scientist. But I trust my observations, and I'm observing something that shouldn't exist. Asterisk. The last entry was dated 4 days ago. Asterisk. Day 17. It knows we're here. It's been circling the camp. Elena is missing. We heard her screaming from the direction of the glacier, but when we went to look, we found only her camera. The lens was shattered from the inside, as if it had frozen and expanded. I'm ending this expedition. We're leaving at first light. Asterisk. But they hadn't left. The snowmobiles were still here. I grabbed my radio. Base, this is Kowalski. I've found the camp. No signs of the team, but I've got evidence of. I paused. What did I have evidence of? Impossible temperature readings and a researcher's paranoid journal? I've got reason to believe they encountered something dangerous, requesting immediate backup. Static answered me. Then, silence. I tried again. Nothing. The radio was working. I could hear the faint hiss of the carrier wave, but no transmission would go through. I checked the satellite beacon. The display flickered and died. The sun was setting. I had maybe 30 minutes of dim twilight left. That's when I saw the footprints. They started at the edge of camp and led toward the lake. At first, I thought they were just ordinary tracks, maybe from one of the researchers. But as I got closer, I realized the scale was all wrong. Each print was 18 inches long, pressed deep into ice that shouldn't have taken an impression at all. The stride length was impossible, 12 feet between steps. I've tracked everything from mountain goats to grizzly bears. I know animal locomotion. These prints were humanoid, 2 feet, 5 toes each, but stretched and elongated in a way that made my skin crawl. And they weren't in snow, they were pressed into the solid ice surface of the lake itself, as if something enormously heavy had walked across it while the ice was soft. But ice doesn't get soft at 40 below zero. I followed the tracks. Professional curiosity mixed with a growing sense of dread that I couldn't shake. The prints led in a straight line toward the Muldrow Glacier, glowing faintly in the last of the twilight, and that's when I saw the first body. Dr. James Morrison stood at the edge of the frozen lake, upright and motionless. For a moment, I thought he was alive, maybe hypothermic, frozen in place, waiting for rescue. I ran toward him, calling his name. But as I got closer, I realized he wasn't breathing, wasn't moving at all. His eyes were open, wide and staring, locked on something in the distance. His mouth was open, mid-scream. He was frozen solid, not frozen like someone who'd died of exposure. I'd seen that before, bodies curled up, trying to conserve heat. Morrison was standing upright, 1 foot forward as if he'd been walking. His arms were outstretched, reaching for something. His skin had turned a blue-white color, like old ice. When I touched his jacket, it felt cold in a way that went beyond temperature. It felt wrong. I checked for a pulse, already knowing I wouldn't find one. His body was rigid, frozen from the inside out. No external damage, no signs of trauma, just impossible, complete freezing. I'd been a ranger for 17 years. I'd recovered drowning victims, fall victims, bear attack victims. I knew death in all its forms, but this was different. This was something that shouldn't be possible. I heard a crack behind me. I spun around, hand going to my .44 Magnum. The lake ice was shifting, settling in the cold. Normal sounds, nothing to worry about. But then I saw the second body. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood 500 yards away, near the base of the glacier. Just like Morrison, upright, frozen, staring. Even from this distance, I could see the blue-white color of her skin, the crystalline frost covering her clothes. My radio suddenly crackled to life. Mark static. Us, this is Nakamura. I'm 20 minutes out. What's your... More static. Situation? Susan Nakamura. Another ranger, one of the good ones. Experienced, smart, someone I'd trust with my life. Susan, stay back, I shouted into the radio. There's something wrong here. The researchers are dead, frozen in place. Something's out here, something dangerous. Copy that. I'm coming in anyway. You need backup. I wanted to argue, but she was right. Whatever had killed Morrison and Rodriguez was still out there, and I wasn't going to last long alone. The temperature was dropping. I could feel it through all my layers, a cold that seemed to seep into my bones. My breath came out in clouds that froze instantly, ice crystals falling like snow. The darkness was complete now, just the faint glow of the aurora overhead and my flashlight cutting through the black. And then, in the distance, I saw something move. It was tall, impossibly tall, maybe 15 feet. The shape was humanoid but wrong, stretched and elongated like a shadow cast by a low sun. It moved across the glacier with a fluid grace that didn't match its size, leaving a trail of glowing blue footprints in the ice. As I watched, it stopped and turned toward me. Even from half a mile away, I could see its eyes, 2 points of blue light in the darkness, fixed directly on me. I did what any sane person would do. I ran. My snowmobile was back at camp, and camp suddenly felt very far away. I ran across the frozen lake, my boots slipping on the ice, my lungs burning with each breath of frigid air. Behind me, I heard nothing, no footsteps, no sounds of pursuit, just silence. Somehow, that was worse. I made it back to the tents and immediately started gathering supplies. Fuel, food, emergency flares, extra ammunition. My hands shook as I loaded my pack, and I told myself it was just the cold. Susan's snowmobile appeared 20 minutes later, headlight cutting through the darkness. She killed the engine and pulled off her helmet, her face serious. "Show me," she said. I took her to Morrison's body first. Susan had been a ranger even longer than me, 23 years, most of it in Alaska. She'd seen everything. But when she saw Morrison standing there, frozen solid in the middle of the ice, her face went pale. "This isn't hypothermia," she said quietly. "This is something else." "There's another one near the glacier," I told her. "Rodriguez, same condition." We found Rodriguez where I'd left her, still standing, still staring. Susan pulled out a small thermometer and held it near the body. The display flickered, then showed -95 degrees Fahrenheit. "That's impossible," Susan said. "The air temperature is only -42. This body is 50 degrees colder than the surrounding environment." "Frozen from the inside out," I said. Susan looked at me. "Marcus, what did you see out there?" I told her about the tracks, the journal entries, the figure on the glacier. I expected her to tell me I was tired, hypothermic, seeing things, but she just nodded slowly. "My grandmother was Inuit," she said, "from a village up north. She used to tell stories about the Tornarsuk ice spirits that guard the frozen places. She said they were ancient, older than humans, and they don't like it when people disturb their territory." She paused. "I always thought they were just stories." "Maybe they were," I said, not believing it. We found the third body an hour later. Dr. Michael Chen, frozen mid-run, his face twisted in terror. His legs were positioned as if he'd been sprinting at full speed when death took him. Ice crystals had formed inside his open mouth. The fourth researcher, Dr. Elena Rodriguez's research partner Thomas Wright, we found near a cluster of ice formations that hadn't been there before. The ice had been shaped into strange geometric patterns, spires and arches that caught the aurora light and threw it back in fractured colors. Wright's body was partially embedded in one of the formations, as if the ice had grown around him while he was still alive. "This is territorial marking," Susan said, her voice tight. "Like a wolf leaving scent markers. It's showing us this is its hunting ground." "We need to leave," I said, "right now." But when we got back to camp, both snowmobiles were frozen solid. The engines were encased in ice, the fuel lines crystallized. The metal was so cold it burned to touch. "That's not possible," Susan said. "These machines were running half an hour ago." My radio crackled, but instead of static, we heard a voice deep and resonant, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. It sounded old, like wind over glaciers, like ice breaking in spring. Susan's face went white. "That's Inuktitut, the old dialect, from before contact with Europeans." "What's it saying?" "It's saying, 'Leave my ice.'" The temperature dropped another 20 degrees in seconds. Ice began forming on our equipment, on our clothes, on our faces. I could feel my eyelashes freezing together. "The emergency shelter," I gasped. "We need to get inside, now." We made it to the shelter, a small reinforced tent, designed for extreme weather, and sealed ourselves inside. I fired up the emergency heater, and slowly, painfully, warmth began to seep back into my body. "We're trapped," Susan said. "No transportation, no communication, and something out there that can freeze us solid just by being near us." "The backup team will come looking when we don't check in," I said. "That's 12 hours from now, minimum. And they won't expect anything like this." Through the tent fabric, we heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, each one accompanied by the creak and crack of ice forming. The footsteps circled our shelter once, twice, 3 times, then they stopped. Silence. Susan and I sat in that silence for what felt like hours. The heater hummed. Our breath misted in the air despite the warmth. And outside, something waited. Then we heard Morrison's voice. "Marcus, Susan, please help me. I'm so cold. Please let me in." I grabbed Susan's arm before she could move. "That's not him. Morrison's dead. We saw his body." "Susan?" Now it was Rodriguez's voice. "Why won't you help us? We're freezing out here. Please open the door." The voices continued, all 4 researchers, calling for help, begging to be let in. Sometimes crying, sometimes screaming. The tent fabric rippled as if something was pressing against it from outside, testing its strength. "Don't listen," I said. "It's trying to make us open the door." Susan nodded, but I could see the strain on her face. Hearing dead people beg for help, knowing you can't save them, it tears at something deep inside you. The psychological assault continued for 2 hours. Then the voices stopped. "Maybe it's gone," Susan whispered. That's when the tent wall bulged inward, frost spreading across the fabric in crystalline patterns. A shape began to form in the ice, a face, enormous and inhuman, with eyes that glowed blue-white. The face seemed to study us, tilting its head with curiosity. Then it spoke, and this time we both understood it. "You do not belong in my ice." Susan grabbed the tent flap. "I'm going for the emergency beacon," she said. "Maybe if we can get it working." "Don't," I said. "Stay inside. Stay where it's warm." But she was already moving, unzipping the door and diving into the darkness. I heard her boots crunching on snow as she ran toward where we'd left the beacon. I heard her breathing hard, heard her curse as she fumbled with the frozen equipment. Then I heard her scream. It wasn't a long scream. It cut off almost immediately, replaced by a sound like ice cracking, like glass breaking from the inside out. I grabbed my flashlight and my gun and ran outside. Susan stood 20 feet away, perfectly still. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see ice crystals forming inside her open mouth, spreading across her tongue, freezing the scream she'd been making. Her eyes went wide with terror, then glassy, then dull. Blue-white frost spread across her skin like a disease. She died in seconds, frozen from the inside while I watched. And behind her, towering over her body, stood the Ice Walker. Up close, it was worse than I'd imagined. The creature stood 15 feet tall, its body translucent like glacial ice. I could see through its skin to the darkness beyond, could see the aurora light bending and refracting through its form. Its limbs were too long, too thin, jointed in places that didn't match human anatomy. When it moved, it didn't walk so much as flow. its body seeming to phase slightly out of reality with each step. Its face was the worst part. Almost human, but stretched and wrong, like a reflection in melting ice. Its eyes were pure blue light, cold and ancient and completely without mercy. When it breathed, ice crystals formed in the air and fell like snow. The cold radiating from it was indescribable. My protective gear meant nothing. I could feel my body temperature dropping, feel ice forming in my beard, feel my fingers going numb even inside my gloves. The ice walker reached down and touched Susan's frozen body. Where its fingers made contact, her body didn't just freeze, it seemed to crack, to fracture into crystalline pieces that glittered in my flashlight beam. It was consuming her, somehow, feeding on whatever warmth and life remained. I raised my .44 Magnum and fired 3 shots. The bullets passed through the creature like it was made of mist. They didn't even slow it down. The ice walker turned its attention to me, those blue eyes focusing with predatory interest. I ran, back to the shelter, back to the only source of heat and safety I had left. I dove through the tent flap and zipped it shut, knowing it wouldn't matter. The creature had already shown it could phase through solid matter when it wanted to. I was going to die, just like Morrison, just like Rodriguez, just like Chen and Wright and Susan. Frozen solid, my body turned to ice, whatever warmth and life I had drained away to feed this ancient thing. But I didn't want to die terrified. I'd spent 17 years in Alaska, learning to respect the wilderness. Maybe that was my mistake, thinking I understood this place just because I could survive it. The Athabascan people knew better. The Inuit knew better. They'd always known something lived in the deepest cold. Something that had been here long before humans. Something that considered this frozen wasteland its home. The tent wall began to frost over. I could see the shape of the ice walker outside. Could see it moving closer. The temperature inside dropped to 0, then kept falling. I thought about running. I thought about fighting. But what was the point? Instead, I did something that probably saved my life. I turned off the heater. The warmth fled immediately, replaced by brutal, absolute cold. My breath froze. My tears froze. Every exposed inch of skin burned with it, but I forced myself to stay still, forced myself to stop fighting, to stop generating heat, and I spoke out loud, my voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't understand this was your place." The creature paused. I could sense it outside the tent, considering. "I'll leave," I said through chattering teeth. "I'll tell them not to come back. Just let me go, please." Silence. Absolute silence. Then, slowly, the cold began to recede. Just a little, just enough that I could breathe without feeling like my lungs would shatter. The frost on the tent walls started to fade. The shape outside moved away. I sat in the darkness, shaking violently, too terrified to move. Minutes passed, hours maybe. I lost track of time in the cold and the fear. Eventually, I heard it, the distant sound of helicopter rotors. The rescue team had finally arrived. I crawled out of the tent as the helicopter landed, its spotlight sweeping across the ice. The crew jumped out, already calling my name, already moving toward the bodies they'd spotted. "Where's Nakamura?" the team leader shouted. I pointed to where Susan's body lay, or what was left of it. The ice had taken her, consumed her, left only fragments. "What happened here?" he demanded. I opened my mouth to tell the truth. Then I looked past him, to the glacier in the distance. In the faint dawn light, I could see a figure standing there, tall and impossibly thin, watching us. Making sure I kept my promise. "Weather," I said. "Sudden temperature drop. Equipment failure. They didn't have time to seek shelter." It was a lie. But it was a lie that might keep others alive. They airlifted me out that morning. By the time we reached the hospital in Fairbanks, I was suffering from severe frostbite on my hands and feet, hypothermia, and what the doctors called acute stress reaction. They kept me for a week, pumping me full of warm fluids, treating the tissue damage, asking questions I couldn't answer honestly. The official report listed the deaths as accidental sudden weather change, equipment malfunction, exposure to extreme cold. All true, technically. The investigation was brief. 4 scientists and 1 ranger, all experienced with cold weather, all caught by a freak temperature drop that the Weather Service couldn't explain, but had to have happened, because what else could it have been? I didn't argue with the conclusions. I signed the forms, accepted the condolences, and kept my mouth shut. But I couldn't stay. The nightmares were bad enough. Susan's face as the ice took her, Morrison standing frozen in eternal terror, that thing towering over me with its blue eyes burning. Worse was the cold. Any cold. When the hospital room temperature dropped below 70, I started hyperventilating. When I saw frost on a window, I had panic attacks that left me shaking for hours. I retired from the Park Service 3 weeks later, moved to Phoenix, Arizona, where the temperature never drops below freezing. Got a job as a security consultant for hiking companies, desk work, mostly, telling people what gear they need and what to do if they get lost. It's safe, it's warm. It's about as far from Wonder Lake as I can get. But I keep track of the news from Alaska. 6 months after the incident, another research team applied for a permit to study the Muldrow Glacier. The permit was denied without explanation. A year later, the Wonder Lake area was quietly restricted to researchers with special authorization that's apparently very difficult to get. And there have been other disappearances. Not many, and never officially connected. A solo hiker who vanished near the glacier in July. A photographer whose equipment was found intact, his body never recovered. 2 climatologists studying ice core samples who drove out to the lake and simply never came back. Each time, the official explanation is reasonable. Animal attack. Fall through thin ice. Weather exposure. Each time, the bodies show the same impossible internal freezing. Each time, I wonder if they saw it. The ice walker, the Tornarsuk. Whatever name you give to something that old and that cold and that alien to human understanding. I got a letter last month from an anthropologist at the University of Alaska. He'd been interviewing Athabascan elders about traditional stories, and one of them had mentioned my name, said I was the ranger who'd seen the ice spirit and lived. Word had gotten around in ways I hadn't anticipated. The anthropologist wanted to interview me, wanted to know what I'd seen, wanted to document it for academic research. I burned the letter. Some things shouldn't be documented. Some things should stay in the stories that elders tell around fires, warnings wrapped in folklore that people can choose to believe or dismiss. Because if you really believe, if you really understand what's out there in the deepest cold, you might never feel warm again. I know I don't. Even here in Phoenix, even in 100-degree heat, I still feel it sometimes, that absolute cold, that presence watching from places where ice never melts. I know it's just in my head, just trauma, just my brain trying to process something it was never meant to understand. But sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I look at pictures of Alaska online. The beautiful wilderness, the northern lights, the pristine glaciers. And sometimes, if I look at the pictures of Denali just right, I can see a shape moving across the ice. Tall and thin and wrong. Still walking its territory. Still guarding its frozen domain. Still waiting for the next person who doesn't understand that some places aren't meant for us. Some places belong to older things. Things that were here first and will be here long after we're gone. The ice walker is still out there. I know it. I saw it let me go, not out of mercy, but out of contract. I'd acknowledged its claim, promised to stay away, promised to keep others away if I could. I've kept that promise. This is the first time I've told the full story. But I needed to tell it. Because climate change is melting the glaciers, and researchers are pushing further into the Arctic every year, and someone needs to know what's waiting for them in the ice. Someone needs to understand that the old stories exist for a reason. The Inuit were right. The Athabascan people were right. There are spirits in the ice, ancient and powerful, and completely indifferent to human life. We call them myths because that's easier than admitting the world is stranger and more dangerous than we want to believe. I learned that lesson at Wonder Lake. I just hope you don't have to learn it the same way I did. My name is Marcus Kowalski. I used to be a ranger at Denali National Park, and I'm telling you now, as clearly as I can, stay away from Wonder Lake. Stay away from the Muldrow Glacier. Stay away from the deep ice. Because something lives there, something that doesn't want company. And if you see footprints in the ice that shouldn't be there, if you feel cold that goes beyond temperature, if you see a tall figure moving across the glacier in the darkness, run, and pray it lets you go. My name is Catherine Mulligan, but everyone calls me Kate. I've been a park ranger for 13 years now, the last 8 spent patrolling the cold waters of Glacier Bay National Park in Alaska. People think being a ranger is all about leading tourists on nature walks and pointing out bears. Maybe that's true in some parks. Not here. Here, you need to know how to handle a boat in waters that can kill you in minutes, how to read the weather before it turns deadly, and how to pull someone out of 40-degree water before hypothermia shuts down their brain. I grew up on these waters. My grandfather fished them, my father fished them, and my husband Tom fished them too, until a rogue wave took him 3 years ago. Now it's just me, my 2 teenagers back in Juneau, and the bay. I know every inlet, every glacier, every hidden rock that can tear a hull open. I've rescued 42 people from these waters over the years, saved every single one. The old-timers tell stories sometimes, over coffee at the ranger station in Bartlett Cove. Russian sailors from the 1800s wrote about strange things in the deep channels. The Tlingit people have legends about creatures that guard the glaciers. I always smiled and nodded. Growing up Alaskan, you learn which stories are real and which are just ways to pass long winter nights. I should have listened better. It was June 1979, that magical time when Alaska gets 16 hours of daylight and the tourists start flooding in. I was 65 miles up in Muir Inlet, one of the deepest parts of the bay, over 1,200 feet in some spots. The tidewater glaciers up there are still massive, calving icebergs the size of houses into water so cold it hurts to look at. The call came in around 2 in the afternoon. The fishing vessel Times Northern Star Times had radioed for help. Their captain said crew members were going overboard. Then the radio went dead. I fired up the Times Ranger 3 Asterisk, my 32-foot patrol boat, and radioed the Coast Guard. They were 4 hours away. Minimum. The Times Northern Star Times was only 30 minutes from my position. I grabbed my medical kit, checked my rescue gear, and pushed the throttles forward. The water was calm that day. Too calm. No wind at all, which is rare up here. The icebergs drifted past like white ghosts, and the glaciers groaned in the distance, that deep, grinding sound they make when thousands of tons of ice shift and break. Normally, I love that sound. That day, it made my skin crawl. I spotted the Times, Northern Star Times, from a mile out. She was just sitting there, engines off, drifting with the current. No one on deck, no one waving for help. I pulled alongside and called out. Nothing. I tied off and climbed aboard, my hand on the radio at my belt. The deck was wet but clean. No blood, no signs of struggle. In the wheelhouse, the radio was smashed, looked like someone had taken a hammer to it. The logbook was open on the chart table. I read the last few entries. Captain Morrison's handwriting got shakier with each line. Asterisk, something in the water. Mike says he saw something big. Asterisk. Asterisk, lost Johnson. He was pulled over the rail. No one touched him, just pulled. Asterisk. Asterisk, water's turning red near the stern. We need help. We need asterisk. The entry stopped mid-sentence. I stepped back out onto the deck. The life preservers were still in their rack. The life raft was still strapped down. 6 men had been on this boat. Now there was nobody. I walked to the stern and looked down at the water. It was red. Not like blood, more like someone had dumped red paint in the water. But it was spreading, swirling, and as I watched, it faded to black and then disappeared completely. The hull groaned. Not the normal creak of a boat at rest. This was different, lower, like something was rubbing against the underside. I got back on the Times Ranger 3 times faster than I should have, nearly falling into the gap between the boats. My hands were shaking as I untied the lines. I radioed the Coast Guard, gave them coordinates, told them what I'd found. Then I radioed back to Bartlett Cove and asked them to send Dr. Robert Sterling, the marine biologist who'd been studying whale behavior in the park. If there was something big in the water, something that could make 6 experienced fishermen abandon ship, I wanted someone who understood marine life. I should have just left, should have waited for the Coast Guard, but I'm a ranger. It's my job to find those men. I started a search pattern, circling outward from the Times Northern Star asterisk. My sonar was acting strange, showing shadows that moved too fast, depths that changed impossibly. I tapped the screen, thinking it was broken. That's when I saw the claw marks on an iceberg. They were 6 feet long, carved deep into ice that should have been harder than concrete. Something with serious strength had grabbed onto that ice, and the marks where fresh water was still seeping into the gouges. The sun caught something floating near the berg. I brought the boat closer. It was a life jacket. Coast Guard approved, bright orange. There was a name written on it in marker, Johnson. The back of the jacket was shredded. Not cut. Asterisk, shredded. Asterisk. Like something with multiple sharp points had grabbed it and torn through the heavy canvas like tissue paper. I pulled the jacket aboard with a boat hook, not wanting to put my hands in the water. As I lifted it, something fell out of the torn fabric. It was a tooth, 6 inches long, curved like a hook, serrated on both edges. It was still warm. I stood there on the deck of my boat, holding a tooth that shouldn't exist, from a creature that couldn't be real, with the life jacket of a dead man dripping on my boots. The water around my boat started to warm up. I could feel it, the temperature rising, which made no sense. This was glacier water. It stayed just above freezing all year round. My sonar pinged. Something big was moving underneath me. The screen showed a shape, but it kept changing, like whatever it was couldn't decide what form to take. Dr. Sterling's voice crackled over the radio. He was 20 minutes out. I told him to hurry. Dr. Sterling arrived in a smaller research boat, the kind with more equipment than comfort. He was younger than me, maybe 35, with the kind of enthusiasm that comes from spending more time with books than with the actual ocean. But he was smart, and right now I needed smart. I showed him the tooth. He held it up to the light, turning it over in his hands. His face went pale. "This is impossible," he said. I pulled it out of a life jacket. "Kate, nothing in these waters has teeth like this. The biggest predator we have is the orca, and their teeth are nothing like this. This is something else." "What kind of something else?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out an underwater camera, one of those expensive setups with lights and a long cable. "I need to see what's down there." I didn't like it, but I helped him set it up. We lowered the camera over the side, feeding the cable down into the dark water. The monitor showed nothing but murky green at first. Then the light kicked in. The water was clearer than it should have been. We could see down maybe 60 feet. The camera showed schools of fish, normal stuff. Then they all scattered at once, like something had spooked them. "There," Sterling said, pointing at the monitor. Something moved past the camera. Just a shadow, but it was huge. The camera swung wildly on its cable, and for a second we saw something that looked like skin pale, almost luminescent, covered in patterns that seemed to pulse with their own light. Then the cable went slack. Sterling pulled it up. The camera was gone. The cable had been cut. No, not cut. The metal cable had been times bitten, times through. The ends were crushed and twisted. "We need to leave," I said. "We need to document this. Kate, this could be a completely unknown species. Do you understand what that means? It means 6 men are dead, and we're next if we stay here." But Sterling was already checking his other equipment. He had a hydrophone and underwater microphone. He dropped it over the side and plugged it into a speaker. The sounds that came through made my stomach drop. It started as whale song, the long, mournful calls that humpbacks make. But it was wrong. The pitch was off, and underneath it was something else. Clicking sounds, like dozens of things snapping together. And under that, something that sounded almost like words. Not English, not any language I knew, but there was rhythm to it. Pattern. Asterisk. Intelligence. Asterisk. "It's communicating," Sterling whispered. "It's trying to communicate, or it's mimicking whale sounds to hunt them," I said. "Some predators do that." The sound changed. Now it was playing back our voices, my radio call to the Coast Guard from earlier. My exact words, in my exact voice, but all broken up and reassembled wrong. Sterling jerked the hydrophone out of the water. "We need to get back to shore," I said. "We need to report this." "Report what?" "That we found a tooth and heard some weird sounds. They'll think we're crazy." I was about to argue when my sonar started screaming. Not figuratively, the machine was emitting a high-pitched squeal like it was overloading. The screen showed something rising from the deep, rising fast. "Move," I shouted, firing up the engines. We were 20 feet away when the water between our two boats exploded upward. I got a good look at it. I wish I hadn't. It was massive, at least 60 feet long, with a body that seemed to shift between shapes. Sometimes it looked like a giant squid, with tentacles that writhed and grabbed at the air. Sometimes it looked more like a whale, but wrong. with too many fins and eyes that glowed with that same bioluminescent light we'd seen on the camera. The tentacles, I counted 8 of them, were covered in suckers the size of dinner plates, and each sucker was ringed with curved hooks that looked like the tooth I'd found. The body was pale gray, almost translucent, and covered in those pulsing light patterns that hurt to look at directly. But it was the eyes that got me. It had at least a dozen of them, arranged in 2 rows along what might have been its head. And they were looking at us, not like an animal looks at prey, like a person looks at something interesting, something it wants to understand. Sterling was taking pictures, his hands shaking, but his camera steady. I was trying to remember how to breathe. The creature sank back beneath the surface, but I could see it moving under the water, circling both boats. The surface rippled and bulged as it passed underneath. Then Sterling's boat lurched. One of the tentacles had wrapped around the outboard motor. The boat tilted, and Sterling stumbled, dropping his camera. It skittered across the deck and fell into the water. "Cut the engine," I yelled. "Cut it now." Sterling hit the kill switch. The tentacle released the motor and slipped back into the water. For a moment, everything was quiet. Both boats drifted, engines off. The creature was still down there. My sonar showed it circling, but it wasn't attacking. "It's intelligent," Sterling said, his voice shaking. "It grabbed the motor, not the boat. It knows that's what makes the boat move." "Kate, this thing is times intelligent. Asterisk. I don't care how smart it is," I said. "We're leaving. Get your boat started and follow me. We stay close and we head for shallow water." "It might not follow us into shallow water," Sterling said, understanding. "Most deep-sea creatures avoid the shallows." "Exactly. Now move." We both fired up our engines. The creature didn't stop us. It just kept circling, those lights pulsing along its body in patterns that almost looked like it was thinking. We made it about a mile before we found the second boat. The Times Sarah May Times was a bigger vessel than the Times Northern Star Times, a 40-footer that did overnight fishing trips. She was on her side, half sunk, with her hull torn open like paper. The tears were too big and too regular to be from rocks. Something had grabbed her, and Times ripped her apart. There were bodies floating in the debris. I forced myself to look. 4 men, all wearing life jackets. But the life jackets hadn't saved them. Something had bitten through them and through the people wearing them. The bites were massive, and they all showed the same pattern, multiple rows of those hooked teeth. One of the bodies was missing everything below the waist. Sterling threw up over the side of his boat. I wanted to, but I couldn't. I had to stay focused, had to get us out of here. That's when I saw it moving again, not circling this time. Asterisk. Following. Asterisk. It was staying just at the edge of sonar range, pacing us, watching us. "It's hurting us," I said. "What?" "Look at the pattern. Every time we try to turn south, it moves to block us. It's pushing us north, deeper into the inlet." Why would it do that? I thought about the claw marks on the iceberg. The bodies arranged in the debris field, not scattered randomly, but times arranged. Asterisk. The way it had targeted the motors on our boats. "It's keeping us in its territory," I said. "It's showing us what happens to things that come into its waters." Sterling looked at me like I was crazy, but he'd seen what I'd seen. He knew I was right. "What do we do?" he asked. "We run," I said, "and we pray it lets us." We didn't make it far before the fog rolled in. It came from nowhere. One minute the sky was clear. The next we were wrapped in gray so thick I could barely see the bow of my own boat. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many seconds. Ice started forming on the railings. This wasn't natural fog. Fog doesn't move like it has a purpose, doesn't roll in against the wind, but this did. "Sterling," I called over the radio. "You still with me?" Static. Then his voice, broken and distant. "I'm here, Kate. My compass is spinning. All of my electronics are going crazy." "Mine too." The GPS showed us in 3 different locations at once. The depth finder said we were in 20 feet of water, then 200, then 500, cycling through numbers that made no sense. Even my radio was cutting in and out, filled with that same clicking sound we'd heard on the hydrophone. The creature was doing this. Somehow, it was disrupting all our equipment. I slowed the boat to a crawl, trying to navigate by memory. I knew these waters, knew where the ice was, where the rocks were. But in this fog, memory wasn't enough. Something bumped the hull, soft at first, then harder. Testing. It's under me, Sterling's voice came through the static. Kate, it's right under my boat. I can see it through the oh God. Sterling? Sterling? His scream cut through the radio, high and desperate. Then I heard the sound of splintering fiberglass, water rushing in, and that clicking sound, so loud it hurt my ears even through the radio speaker. I'm going in, Sterling shouted. Kate, it's pulling me. The radio went dead. I spun the wheel, trying to head toward where I thought his boat was. The fog was so thick I nearly ran into an iceberg before I saw it. I pulled away at the last second, felt ice scrape along the hull. Sterling. Nothing. Just the fog and the sound of my own engine and that terrible clicking that seemed to be all around me now. Then I saw lights in the water, those bioluminescent patterns, pulsing and swirling. They were beautiful and horrible at the same time. They formed shapes, circles, spirals, patterns that seemed to pull at my eyes, making me want to stare at them even as my brain screamed at me to look away. I grabbed a flare from the emergency kit and fired it straight up. The red light cut through the fog, and for just a moment I could see. Sterling's boat was 20 yards away, capsized, and next to it, rising from the water, was the creature. It was bigger than I'd thought. Its body rose 15 feet above the surface, tentacles spread wide like it was reaching for the sky. The light patterns were faster now, more intense, and I realized it was angry. We'd invaded its home, and now it was making us pay. One of the tentacles was wrapped around something. As the flare light died, I saw what it was. Sterling, still alive. The tentacle had him around the waist, holding him out of the water. He was screaming, trying to pry the suckers off, but they were too strong. The hooks were digging into his sides, blood running down into the water. The creature pulled him closer, and I saw its mouth for the first time. It was on the underside of the body, surrounded by smaller tentacles that pulled and grabbed. The mouth was circular, filled with rings of those terrible teeth, and it was opening. Sterling, I screamed. He looked at me. Even through the fog and the dark, I could see his eyes. He knew what was about to happen. He knew. Document it, he shouted. Kate, document every... The creature pulled him under. The water churned and frothed, glowing with that bioluminescent light. I saw shapes moving beneath the surface, Sterling struggling, the creature holding him, feeding. The water turned red. I stood there, frozen. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. Couldn't think. One of the smartest people I'd ever met had just been eaten alive right in front of me, and I'd done nothing to stop it. The creature rose again. It still had Sterling. What was left of him? It held him up like a trophy, like it was showing me what it could do. Then it dropped the body and sank beneath the surface. I finally moved, fired up the engine, and ran. The fog stayed thick, but I didn't care. I pushed the throttle to full and headed west, toward where I knew the shallow channels were. Behind me, I could hear splashing huge amounts of water being displaced. It was following. My sonar was still useless, cycling through impossible readings. I was navigating blind in fog, with a monster chasing me, and I had no idea if I was even going the right direction. Then the engine stuttered. No, not now. Please not now. It coughed, coughed again. The RPMs dropped. I looked at the fuel gauge still half full. Looked at the oil pressure normal. Nothing was wrong with the engine, except it was dying anyway. The boat slowed more. The engine gave one final cough and stopped completely, dead in the water, in fog so thick I couldn't see 10 feet. With that thing circling somewhere beneath me, I tried the starter. Nothing, not even a click. The battery was dead. Everything was dead. Radio, lights, sonar, GPS. Even my flashlight wouldn't turn on. The creature had killed all the electrical systems on the boat. I stood in the wheelhouse, listening to the water lap against the hull. Listening to that clicking sound getting closer. Watching as those lights appeared in the fog, circling slowly around my dead boat. It was taking its time. Playing with me. Showing me that I was trapped, that there was nowhere to run, that this bay belonged to it and always had. I grabbed the rifle I kept mounted in the wheelhouse. It was a .30-06, strong enough to drop a brown bear. I had no idea if it would even scratch this thing, but it was all I had. The clicking got louder, the lights got brighter. Something bumped the boat from below, gentle at first, then hard enough to knock me off my feet. I scrambled back up, raised the rifle, and waited. A tentacle rose out of the water next to the boat. Then another. Then two more. They were exploring the hull, testing it, feeling for weak points. The suckers made wet, slapping sounds as they attached and released. One tentacle slid over the rail and onto the deck. It moved like a snake, reaching toward the wheelhouse. Toward me, I fired. The shot was deafening in the fog. The bullet hit the tentacle center mass, and I saw it punch through. Green blood, actual green blood, sprayed across the deck. The tentacle jerked back. The clicking sound turned into something else, a shriek that was half whale song and half something I'd never heard before. It was the sound of pain and anger and intelligence all mixed together. All four tentacles slammed into the boat at once. The whole vessel shuddered. I heard fiberglass crack. Felt the deck tilt as the creature tried to flip the boat over. I fired again. Again. Emptying the rifle into those tentacles, into the water where I thought the body was. I didn't know if I was hitting it or just making it angrier. The boat tilted further. 30 degrees. 40. Water started pouring over the low rail. I dropped the rifle and grabbed onto the wheel, trying to keep from sliding across the deck. This was it. This was how I died. Drowned or eaten in the waters I'd loved my whole life, by something that shouldn't exist. But the boat didn't flip. The tentacles released, the clicking faded, the lights dimmed. For a moment, I thought it was over. Thought maybe I'd actually hurt it badly enough to make it retreat. Then I realized the truth. It was giving me hope. Letting me think I might survive. Making the fear last longer. Because when the lights came back, they were brighter than ever. And they were everywhere. The creature surfaced on all sides of the boat at once. I'd been wrong about its size. It wasn't 60 feet long. It was closer to 80, maybe 90. Big enough to wrap around my boat twice over. Big enough to pull me down to the bottom of the bay where I'd never be found. The tentacles rose again. 8 of them, each thicker than my body, reaching for the boat like fingers reaching for a toy. I closed my eyes and thought of my kids. Hoped they'd understand why I'd stayed, why I'd tried to find those fishermen instead of running. Hoped they'd be okay without me. The tentacles wrapped around the boat and began to time squeeze asterisk. The boat groaned like a dying animal. Fiberglass cracked, metal bent. Water poured in from a dozen places at once. I was going to die here. There was no escape. No help coming. Just me and this ancient thing that had probably been hunting these waters since before humans even came to Alaska. But then I remembered something. Something my grandfather had told me when I was little. About the Tlingit legends. About the guardians of the glaciers. They weren't evil, he'd said. They were protectors. They only killed when their home was threatened. I was standing in its home. In its territory. And I was the threat. The clicking stopped. In the sudden silence, I could hear my own heart pounding, could hear water dripping, could hear ice creaking somewhere in the fog. And then I heard something else, a sound like breathing, but huge, like a whale's blow, but deeper. Closer, one of the tentacles released, then another. The boat rocked back to level, though it was still sinking. I had maybe 5 minutes before it went under completely. The creature's body surfaced right next to the boat, close enough to touch, close enough to see every detail of that translucent skin, those pulsing lights, those dozen eyes. And it was watching me. Really watching me. Not like prey, like it was trying to decide something. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe I was delirious from fear. Maybe some part of my brain understood something my conscious mind didn't. But I raised my hands, palms out, empty, and I spoke to it. "I'm sorry," I said. My voice was shaking but clear. "I didn't mean to invade your home. I was just trying to help. Trying to find the people who were lost. I'm sorry." The lights changed. Slowed. The pattern shifted to something that almost looked curious. "I'll leave," I said. "I'll tell people to stay away. I'll make sure no one else comes here. Just, please, let me go home to my children." The clicking started again, but softer now. Different. It ran up and down the scale like it was processing what I'd said, like it was times thinking. Asterisk. Then the tentacles released completely. The creature sank back into the water. But it didn't leave. The lights stayed visible just below the surface, circling my dying boat. My engine sputtered to life. I didn't question it, didn't wonder how electricity could just come back on. I just pushed the throttle forward and headed for shallow water. The creature followed, but it stayed back. escorting me, making sure I left. The fog began to lift. I could see the shore now, rocky and unwelcoming, but it was solid ground. The water was getting shallower. 30 feet, 20, 15. The creature stopped following. I looked back and saw it surface one last time, far enough away that it looked small. Almost normal. The lights pulsed twice fast, then slow, then fast again, and then it dove. My sonar showed it descending, down, 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 until it was so deep the sonar couldn't track it anymore. Back to whatever caves or trenches it called home. I ran the boat onto a gravel beach, hard enough to knock me down. I didn't care. I scrambled out onto the rocks and crawled away from the water, not stopping until I was 50 feet up from the tide line. Then I collapsed and cried, for Sterling, for the fishermen, for everything I'd seen and could never unsee. I was there for 18 hours before the Coast Guard found me. My emergency beacon had finally started working again once the creature left. They brought blankets and hot coffee and a helicopter to take me back to civilization. I told them everything. They wrote it all down. Then they very politely suggested I was suffering from hypothermia-induced hallucinations and trauma from witnessing Dr. Sterling's drowning accident. They found his boat, capsized and empty. They found my boat, run aground and damaged but intact. They never found his body. Never found the fishermen's bodies. Never found any evidence of what had really happened. The official report says Sterling drowned when his boat capsized in fog. The Times Northern Star Times crew is listed as lost at sea, cause unknown. The Times Sarah May Times sank due to hull failure in rough weather. No one mentioned the teeth marks, the claw marks, the impossible readings from all our equipment. They closed Muir Inlet to commercial fishing. Said it was for conservation purposes. Restricted it to research vessels only, and only with special permits. I knew better. They'd seen something in the evidence. Maybe not enough to believe me, but enough to be careful. I transferred to a land-based position. I can't go on the water anymore. Not deep water. Even looking at the ocean from shore makes my hands shake. The kids think I'm afraid because of what happened to their dad. They're not wrong, but it's not the whole truth. Sometimes, late at night, I hear clicking sounds. I know it's just the house settling or the wind in the trees. But part of me wonders if it's checking on me, making sure I kept my promise. I did. I never told anyone where exactly I'd been, never gave the coordinates, never led anyone back to that deep water where something ancient guards its territory. But I wasn't the only one who knew. 3 weeks after I got back, a ranger from Kenai Fjords National Park called me. Said he'd heard about what happened at Glacier Bay, wanted to talk to someone who'd understand. He'd had boats go missing in his park too. Found them days later, completely empty, electronics fried, hulls damaged in ways that didn't make sense. He'd seen lights in the deep channels at night, heard sounds that weren't any whale species he recognized. I told him to close those areas, make up whatever reason he needed, but close them. He did. Since then, I've gotten calls from rangers in Katmai, in Wrangell Street, Elias, in Lake Clark. Always the same story, always the deep water areas. Always near the glaciers. There's something in Alaska's waters, maybe lots of somethings. Maybe they've been here longer than we have, living in the deep places we can't reach, coming up only when we threaten their territory. The Tlingit knew. The Russians knew. They tried to warn us with their stories and legends, but we didn't listen. We never listen until it's too late. I keep the tooth I found in a locked drawer in my desk. Sometimes I take it out and look at it, just to remind myself that it was real, that I didn't imagine the whole thing. It's still warm. Even after all this time, even locked in a dark drawer, that tooth is warmer than it should be. Sometimes I think I can see light moving inside it, like there's still something alive in there. My kids are 17 and 15 now. Old enough to understand when I tell them to never go into deep water. Never go where you can't see the bottom. Never trust that you're alone in the ocean. Because you're not. We're never alone. Last week, a cruise ship reported seeing something large in Glacier Bay. A tourist got pictures blurry, distant, could be anything. Could be an orca, or a whale, or a trick of light on the water. But I looked at those pictures. Looked at the pattern in the water, the shape just beneath the surface, the way the light reflected strange colors. I know what it is. It's still there, still guarding its home, still waiting for the next person who ventures too deep, stays too long, threatens what it's protected for thousands of years. The Park Service added more restrictions to Muir Inlet. No vessels after dark, no anchoring in the deep channels, no underwater photography or research without explicit permission, which they never grant. They say it's for the whales, for the ecosystem, to give nature a chance to recover. They're not wrong. But they're not telling the whole truth either. Sometimes I dream about that day, about Sterling's face as the creature pulled him under, about those lights pulsing in the dark water, about how close I came to never coming home. But mostly, I dream about the moment it let me go, the moment it chose to spare me. I think it understood. I think it knew I was a mother, a widow, someone just trying to do her job and protect people. I think it recognized something in me, maybe the same fierce protectiveness that drives it to guard these waters. Or maybe it just decided I'd learned my lesson, that I'd be more useful, alive, spreading the warning, keeping others away. Either way, I keep my promise. I guard the bay from the land now, the way it guards the bay from the depths. I turn away boats that want to go too far north. I file reports recommending closures and restrictions. I make sure people stay safe. And on very still nights, when the bay is calm and the moon is full, I sometimes see lights in the distant water, pulsing patterns that almost look like language, like it's talking to others of its kind, spread throughout Alaska's vast network of deep channels and glacial fjords. They're out there. They've always been out there. They'll always be out there. And I'll make sure we stay out of their way. My name is Catherine Mulligan. I'm a park ranger, and I've seen what lives in the deep places. This is my story. This is my warning. Stay out of the deep water. Stay away from the glaciers. And if you see lights in the water at night, lights that pulse and shift and seem to watch you back, time's run. Asterisk. Some territories were never meant for us. My name is James Redfern, but everyone calls me Jimmy. For 19 years, I've worked for the National Park Service. 15 of those years have been right here at Katmai, Alaska, a place most people have never heard of, in a part of the state that feels like the edge of the world. I'm 47 now. My wife Sarah lives in Anchorage most of the year because she got tired of the isolation. Can't blame her. My son Danny joined the military 2 years ago, so it's mostly just me out here now. Before the Park Service, I taught geology at the University of Alaska. I was pretty good at it too. But after spending a summer studying the eruption sites here in Katmai, I couldn't go back to a classroom. Something about this place grabbed hold of me and wouldn't let go. The Valley of 10,000 Smokes is what they call it. Back in 1912, a volcano called Novarupta exploded with so much force it buried entire villages under ash. Even now, 70 years later, the valley still steams and hisses like a sleeping giant that might wake up any second. Fumaroles, those are vents in the ground that release volcanic gases, dot the landscape like tiny chimneys leading straight to hell. My job is to monitor the volcanic activity, check the gas levels, and make sure the few researchers who come out here don't do anything stupid. I've studied volcanoes all over the world. 30 years of examining rocks and lava flows and seismic data. I've never believed in fire spirits or underground demons or any of that superstitious nonsense. Science explains everything, or at least that's what I thought. September in Alaska means winter is coming fast. The days get shorter, the wind gets colder, and most sensible people clear out before the first snow. But this September, 1983, was different. The volcanic activity had been increasing for weeks, more steam vents opening up, ground temperatures rising in spots where they shouldn't. The USGS Volcanic Observatory in Anchorage was interested enough to send a research team. Dr. Maria Santos led the team. She was sharp, maybe 40 years old, with a reputation for being fearless around active volcanoes. She brought 3 other researchers with her. Mark Davidson, a graduate student who was too eager for his own good. Dr. Patricia Lamb, who specialized in gas chemistry. And Dr. Thomas Wright, who studied seismic patterns. I met them at the landing strip on September 12th. The helicopter dropped them off with enough equipment to monitor every burp and hiccup the mountain made. Maria shook my hand with a grip that said she didn't need any help from a park ranger. "We'll be set up by tomorrow," she told me. "This increase in activity is unusual. The patterns don't match any recorded data from this region." I helped them haul their gear to the research camp, 3 reinforced tents, and a small equipment shelter about 2 miles into the valley. The ground beneath our feet was warm. Not hot enough to burn through boot soles, but warm enough to notice. Steam rose from cracks in the ash-covered earth, and the smell of sulfur hung thick in the air. "Jimmy, you've been here 15 years, Maria said as we set up the last tent. "Have you ever seen activity like this?" I thought about it. The fumaroles open and close all the time. Temperature fluctuations are normal. But you're right, something feels different. Different how? I couldn't explain it then. It was just a feeling in my gut, the kind of instinct you develop after spending enough time in one place. The valley felt wrong somehow. Too quiet. I hadn't seen any ptarmigan or ground squirrels in days, and those animals were usually everywhere. "Just different," I said. That night, back at my ranger station, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the research team camped out in the valley. The radio crackled with static volcanic interference, always made communication spotty. Through my window, I could see a faint, red glow on the horizon where the valley lay. That glow had been getting brighter every night. At 3:47 a.m., my radio screamed to life. "Jimmy! Jimmy, come in!" It was Maria's voice, high and tight with panic. I grabbed the radio. "Maria, what's wrong? We need immediate evacuation, right now. There's something." The transmission broke up into static. "Maria, what's happening?" Her voice came back, broken and distorted. "Underground sounds not possible." More static. Then nothing. I tried calling back. No response. I tried the emergency channel. Dead silence. I grabbed my gear seismograph equipment, gas detection meter, emergency radio, flare gun, and headed for my truck. The valley was 45 minutes away by the access road. In the dark, with my hands shaking on the wheel, it felt like hours. The sun was just starting to rise when I reached the research camp. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No generator running, no voices, just the constant hiss of steam vents and a low rumbling sound I'd never heard before. The tents were still standing, which was good. But something was wrong with the arrangement. I'd helped set up this camp just yesterday, and I knew exactly where everything had been. Now the equipment cases were scattered in a wide circle around the tents, like someone had thrown them, or like they'd run. "Maria," I called out. My voice echoed flat against the ash-covered ground. "Dr. Santos." Nothing. I checked my gas meter. Sulfur dioxide levels were elevated but not dangerous. Ground temperature was 143 degrees Fahrenheit, hot but not abnormal for this area. I entered the main tent. Everything was still there. Sleeping bags, personal items, Maria's laptop still open with data scrolling across the screen, half-eaten meals on the folding table, but no people. The seismograph equipment was still recording. I checked the printout and felt my stomach drop. The readings showed underground movement, but not the kind you'd expect from magma flows or tectonic shifts. This was rhythmic, regular, like something massive was walking beneath the earth. That's impossible, I thought. Seismographs don't lie, but they also don't record footsteps. I heard a sound then, a low moan that might have been wind or might have been something else. It came from deeper in the valley, where the newer fumaroles had opened up. I should have radioed for help right then, should have waited for backup. But I kept thinking about Maria's voice on the radio, how scared she'd sounded. If the team was hurt, every minute mattered. I followed the scattered equipment toward the sound. The morning light was gray and weak, filtered through volcanic haze. Steam rose from the ground in thick columns, and the rumbling grew louder with each step. That's when I found Mark Davidson. He was lying on his back next to a fumarole that hadn't existed yesterday. The vent was about 3 feet wide, glowing red from deep inside. Mark's eyes were open, staring at the sky. His face was twisted in an expression of absolute agony. I knelt beside him, checking for a pulse even though I already knew. His skin was cold to the touch, but when I looked closer, I saw something that made my blood freeze. His clothes weren't burned. There were no scorch marks, no signs of external fire damage, but through his open mouth, I could see down his throat. The inside of his body was charred, completely burned, like someone had lit a fire inside him and cooked him from the inside out. That's not possible. You can't burn from the inside without external heat. It violates every law of thermodynamics. I stumbled backward and vomited into the ash. When I looked up, wiping my mouth, I saw the fumarole next to Mark's body was surrounded by more vents. At least 20 of them, all opened recently, all arranged in a perfect circle. Nature doesn't make circles. Volcanic vents open randomly, following magma channels and fault lines. They don't form geometric patterns. The rumbling sound grew louder. The ground beneath my feet vibrated. My gas meter started beeping, carbon dioxide levels spiking. I needed to get out of there. I ran back to the camp, my mind racing. Mark was dead. The others were missing. The volcanic activity was increasing. I needed to call this in, get a rescue team, evacuate the entire area. But when I tried my radio, all I got was static. The volcanic interference was too strong. I tried my emergency satellite phone. Nothing. It was like the valley itself was blocking all communication. I was checking the phone when I heard the helicopter. Thank God, I thought. Someone heard the distress call. The helicopter came in low over the valley ridge. I waved my arms, trying to signal. But as it approached the research camp, something happened. The engine sputtered. Black smoke poured from the exhaust. The pilot fought with the controls, trying to gain altitude, but the helicopter spun and dropped behind the far ridge. I heard the crash, saw the smoke rising. I stood there, frozen. That helicopter had been my ticket out. Now it was gone. A sound made me turn around. Dr. Patricia Lamb was staggering toward me from between two fumaroles. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "Patricia," I ran to her. "What happened? Where's Maria and Thomas?" She grabbed my arm. Her hand was burning hot, like she had a fever. "We have to leave," she gasped. "Right now." "They're down there. They're angry." "Who's down there?" "Patricia, you're not making sense." She looked at me, and I saw real terror in her eyes. "The fire spirits. The ones the Aleut people warned about. They're real, Jimmy. They're real, and they're—" She never finished the sentence. Her eyes went wide, and she opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Her whole body went rigid. Smoke started coming from her mouth, from her nose, from her ears. I tried to help her, but she was burning up from inside. The heat coming off her body was intense, like standing next to an open furnace. She collapsed, and by the time she hit the ground, she was dead, cooked from the inside, just like Mark. I backed away, my mind refusing to accept what I'd just seen. People don't spontaneously combust. It doesn't happen. There's always an external ignition source. The ground around me started to crack. New fumaroles opened up, one after another, each one glowing with that deep red light. Steam hissed from the vents, and in the steam, I saw shapes. Human-shaped shadows moving inside the vapor. I ran. I made it back to my truck, my lungs burning from the sulfur gas and panic. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine turned over, and I'd never been so grateful for the sound of a working motor in my life. I drove fast, too fast for the rough access road. The truck bounced over rocks and potholes, but I didn't care. I just needed distance between me and that valley. But as I drove, I realized I couldn't leave. Maria and Thomas were still out there, somewhere. And that helicopter pilot might still be alive. I couldn't just abandon them, no matter what I'd seen. I stopped at my ranger station just long enough to grab more supplies. Water, emergency medical kit, my backup radio. I also grabbed something I'd never thought I'd need: a rifle. Not because I thought it would do any good against whatever was in that valley, but because holding it made me feel less helpless. The sun was higher now, but the light seemed wrong. Everything had a reddish tinge, like looking through tinted glass. The air itself felt hot and oppressive. I drove back toward the helicopter crash site. The smoke was still rising, black against the gray sky. The wreckage was scattered across a flat area near one of the old 1,912 lava flows. The helicopter had broken apart on impact. I found the pilot strapped in his seat, dead, but not from the crash. His body showed the same signs as Mark and Patricia, burned from the inside out. Whatever had killed him had done it before. The helicopter even hit the ground. A sound made me spin around. Someone was running toward me from the direction of the research camp. It was Maria. "Jimmy!" She was limping, her face covered in ash. Blood ran down her left arm. I ran to meet her. "Maria, thank God. What happened?" She bent over, gasping for breath. "Thomas. We have to find Thomas. He's still down there. He went to check the seismographs and—" She looked up at me. You saw them, didn't you? You saw what they did to Mark and Patricia. I saw. I helped her sit down on a rock. Her arm was badly burned, but from the outside this time like she'd touched something hot. Maria, we need to leave. Right now. Whatever's happening here. We can't stop it. I know what they are. Her voice was hollow. I've been studying Alat folklore since I got here. The old stories talk about fire spirits that guard the volcanic regions. They're called the Arngwak, the ones who dwell in heat. The Alot people left offerings, performed rituals, treated the volcanoes as sacred. But we didn't. We just came in with our equipment and our arrogance and started disturbing their territory. I wanted to tell her that was crazy. I wanted to explain how volcanic activity worked, how there was a scientific explanation for everything. But I'd seen Patricia burn from the inside. I'd seen those shapes in the steam. Even if that's true, I said, how do we stop them? We don't. Maria's voice broke. We can't. They're not physical beings we can fight. They're elemental. They're made of the volcano itself. A rumbling sound interrupted us. The ground started shaking, not the slow build of an earthquake, but sudden and violent. Cracks appeared in the earth around us, spreading like spiderwebs. Red light glowed from deep inside the cracks. Run, Maria screamed. We ran toward my truck, but the ground kept opening up beneath our feet. I grabbed Maria's hand, pulling her across a widening gap. The heat coming up from below was intense. My eyes watered from the smoke and steam. We made it to the truck. I gunned the engine, but we'd only gone a few hundred yards when I saw it. A figure stood in the middle of the road ahead. At first, I thought it was Thomas. But as we got closer, I realized this wasn't human. The figure was shaped like a person, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, but it was made of living magma. Red and orange, glowing from within, radiating heat so intense the air around it shimmered. Where its eyes should be, there were 2 points of white-hot light. I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop maybe 20 feet from the thing. Back up, Maria whispered. Slowly. I started to reverse, but more figures appeared behind us. 3 of them, then 5, then 10. We were surrounded. The fire spirits stood there, watching us. Not moving, just watching with those burning eyes. The heat was getting worse. The truck's engine started to overheat. The plastic on the dashboard began to warp. They're hurting us, I said. They're pushing us somewhere. Back to the valley, Maria said. They want us in their territory. One of the spirits moved closer. It raised an arm, and fire flowed from its hand like water. The fire hit the ground in front of us, and a new fumarole opened up, right in the middle of the road. We had no choice. I turned the truck around and drove back toward the valley, toward the research camp, with the fire spirits following behind us like a funeral procession. When we reached the camp, I saw Thomas. He was alive, crouched inside the equipment shelter. When he saw us, he ran out. Thank God, he shouted. I thought they got you too. The 3 of us regrouped inside the shelter. It was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, with reinforced walls designed to protect equipment from the elements, not designed to protect people from fire spirits. They'd been surrounding this place for hours, Thomas said. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes red from crying or smoke or both. Every time I try to leave, they appear. They won't let me go. Why are they doing this? I asked. Even though part of me already knew. Because we didn't respect them, Thomas said. I was using the seismograph when one of them appeared right next to me. It didn't attack, it just communicated. Not with words. It put thoughts directly into my head. What did it say? Maria asked. Thomas's voice shook. It said we treat this place like it's dead, like it's just rock and heat and chemical reactions. But it's not dead. It's alive. The volcano is alive, and we're crawling all over it with our machines, taking measurements, treating it like a specimen. The spirits are its guardians. They've been here for thousands of years, and they're tired of being ignored. Outside, the fire spirits were gathering. I counted at least 20 of them now, all standing in a circle around the shelter. The temperature inside was rising. Sweat poured down my face. The water in our bottles was getting hot. We can't stay here, I said. We'll cook. We can't leave either, Maria pointed out. They'll burn us like they did the others. That's when Thomas told us the worst part. There's one more thing they showed me. They're not the only ones. There are others like them at every volcanic site in Alaska, Mount Redoubt, Mount Spur, Augustine Island. Wherever there's fire and heat, they exist, and they're all waking up. The shelter's walls started to glow red. The metal was heating up. We had maybe minutes before it became an oven. The Aleut rituals, I said suddenly, remembering what Maria had mentioned. What were they? How did they show respect? Offerings, Maria said. They left offerings of fish and berries. They sang songs. They acknowledged the spirit's presence and asked permission before crossing volcanic land. We don't have fish or berries, Thomas said, but we have something else. I pulled out my ranger badge, the one I'd carried for 19 years. We have acknowledgement. We have respect. It was a desperate idea, probably a stupid one, but we were out of options. I opened the shelter door. The heat hit me like a physical wall. The fire spirit stood there, waiting. I walked forward slowly, holding my badge. I am James Redfern, I said loudly. I have worked in this place for 15 years. I have studied your home. I have learned its secrets. I see now that I didn't understand. I didn't respect what I should have respected. The spirits didn't move, but their eyes seemed to focus on me. We ask for safe passage, I continued. We will leave your territory. We will tell others to treat this place as sacred. We will honor your guardianship. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then one of the spirits, the one closest to me, raised its arm. Fire swirled around its hand. And I thought this was it. I was about to burn like the others. But the fire didn't come toward me. Instead, the spirit pointed toward the road leading out of the valley. The other spirits began to fade, becoming transparent, then disappearing back into the fumaroles. Go, Thomas whispered. Go now before they change their minds. We ran to the truck. I drove faster than I'd ever driven in my life, expecting any second for the spirits to reappear and block our path. But they didn't. They let us go. We made it to my ranger station as the sun was setting. The red light in the valley behind us was brighter than ever, like the whole landscape was on fire. We were exhausted, dehydrated, traumatized, but we were alive. Maria was checking her arm. The burn looked bad but not life-threatening. Thomas sat in a corner, staring at nothing. I tried the radio again, still nothing but static. We need to warn people, Maria said. If Thomas is right, if there are more of these spirits at other volcanoes, no one will believe us, I said. Would you have believed it yesterday? She shook her head. No, but we have to try. We have evidence. The seismograph readings, the fumarole patterns, the bodies that burned from the inside out with no external heat source, I said. Maria, they'll say it was volcanic gases, equipment malfunction, anything but the truth. Because the truth is impossible. Thomas looked up. His eyes were haunted. They showed me more, he said quietly. While I was alone in the shelter, they showed me what happens if we don't respect them. If we keep drilling, keep measuring, keep treating the earth like it's ours to exploit. What did they show you? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Fire, Thomas said. Eruptions at every volcanic site in Alaska, all at once. The 1,912 eruption, multiplied by 100. They can do it. They will do it if we don't listen. A sound outside made us all freeze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate. I grabbed my rifle and went to the window. A figure stood in the clearing outside my station. Not a fire spirit this time. A person. It was Dr. Maria Santos. I turned to look at the Maria sitting in my station, treating her burned arm. She looked back at me with confusion. Jimmy? She said. What's wrong? I looked back out the window. The other Maria stood there, watching. Waiting. As I stared at her, she started to change. Her form rippled like heat waves. Her body began to glow from within, red and orange. Her eyes turned to points of white fire. They followed us, Thomas said behind me. His voice was flat, resigned. I knew they would. They let us think we'd escaped, but they've been here all along. The fire spirit, wearing Maria's shape, raised one arm. Every fumarole within 100 yards of my station erupted simultaneously, sending columns of steam and fire into the darkening sky. The ground shook, the walls of my station groaned. We have to leave, the real Maria said, right now. But when I opened the door, more spirits were emerging from the ground. They rose up from newly opened vents in the earth, taking shape as they came. Some looked almost human. Others were just vaguely person-shaped masses of living magma. We were trapped. The ritual didn't work, I said. They're still hunting us. No, Thomas said. He was standing now, and there was something different about him, a calm acceptance. The ritual worked. They let us go. But I didn't go. I stayed too long. I heard too much. I know too much. As he spoke, I saw what I'd missed before. Thomas's skin had a faint reddish glow to it. His eyes reflected the firelight in a way that wasn't quite natural. Thomas, Maria said carefully, what did they do to you? They showed me the truth, he said. We think we're separate from the earth. We think we're above it, that we can study it and control it and exploit it without consequences. But we're not separate. We're part of it. And when we heard it, we hurt ourselves. Smoke was coming from his mouth as he spoke. His skin was getting brighter, the glow spreading from inside. They offered me a choice, Thomas continued. I could leave and spend the rest of my life knowing what I'd seen, knowing that we're slowly killing something ancient and powerful. Or I could become part of it, part of the fire, part of the guardianship. Thomas, no, Maria said. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have. He smiled, and his teeth glowed red. It's okay, Maria. It doesn't hurt. It's beautiful. Actually, being part of something so much bigger than myself. He walked toward the door. The fire spirits outside parted to let him pass. As he moved among them, his body began to change more dramatically. His clothes burned away. His skin became molten. His human shape held for a moment longer, then transformed completely into one of them. The thing that had been Thomas Wright turned to look at us one more time. Then it sank into the ground, disappearing into a fumarole, joining with the fire below. I stood there, unable to process what I'd just witnessed. A man had just transformed into a fire spirit right in front of me. A colleague, a scientist, someone who'd spent his whole life believing in empirical evidence and rational explanations. We're next, Maria whispered. They're going to do the same to us. But she was wrong. The fire spirits began to retreat, one by one sinking back into the earth. Within minutes, they were all gone. Only the fumaroles remained, glowing in the darkness. Why? Maria asked. Why did they let us go? I thought about it. Thomas, he gave himself to them. Maybe that was the price. One life in exchange for two. That's barbaric. No, I said. That's ancient. That's how the old world worked. Balance, exchange, respect backed by sacrifice. We waited all night in my station, but the spirits didn't return. When morning came, a rescue helicopter finally made it through. We told them about the Death's volcanic accident, we said. Equipment failure. Toxic gas exposure. All lies that were easier to believe than the truth. They found the bodies 3 days later. Mark, Patricia, and the helicopter pilot. The official report said death by volcanic gases and heat exposure. No mention of internal burning, no mention of the impossible. They never found Thomas. His body wasn't with the others, and we didn't tell them where he'd gone. How could we? Maria left Alaska a week later. Last I heard, she took a job teaching at a university in California. Safe. Far from any volcanic activity. She stopped returning my calls after a few months. As for me, I retired from the Park Service. 19 years of work, and I just walked away. I couldn't stay in that valley. Couldn't monitor those fumaroles, knowing what was down there, what was watching. I moved to Fairbanks, as far from Katmai as I could get while still staying in Alaska. Got a job at a community college teaching basic geology. Safe, simple work with no field work required. But even now, 3 months later, I can't stand to be around heat. I keep my apartment cold, don't use the stove, won't go near a fireplace. My therapist calls it pyrophobia, an irrational fear of fire. But there's nothing irrational about it. I know what fire can do. I know what lives inside it. The Valley of 10,000 Smokes is restricted now. No research teams allowed. Officially, it's because of increased volcanic activity. Unofficially, I think someone believes us, or at least believes enough to keep people away. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. Thomas said the spirits exist at every volcanic site in Alaska. Mount Redupt, Mount Spur, Augustine Island. Dozens of active volcanoes, and we're still drilling near them, studying them, treating them like dead geology instead of living guardians. Last week, I read about seismic activity increasing at Mount Redoubt. Researchers are excited, planning expeditions to study it. I thought about calling them, warning them. But what would I say? What would they believe? Sometimes, late at night, I look at maps of volcanic regions. Alaska, Hawaii, the Pacific Northwest, the Ring of Fire, all those volcanoes, all that heat. I wonder how many spirits are down there, how many ancient guardians we've been disturbing without knowing. I wonder what happens when we finally push them too far. The Aleut people knew. They understood that some places are sacred, that some forces should be respected rather than studied. They left offerings, performed rituals, asked permission. We called it superstition. We called it primitive belief. We were wrong. I still have the seismograph data from that day in September. Sometimes I look at it, study those impossible readings showing rhythmic underground movement. Footsteps beneath the earth. Proof that something walks in the fire, something old and powerful and growing tired of being ignored. The official death toll was 4. Mark Davidson, Patricia Lamb, the helicopter pilot, and Dr. Thomas Wright, missing and presumed dead. But I know the real count. 3 dead, 1 transformed. 1 man who chose to become part of something he couldn't defeat. I dream about Thomas sometimes. In my dreams, he's down there under Katmai, walking through chambers of molten rock, guarding the fire with the others. In my dreams, he's happy. When I wake up, my apartment is always cold. But I can still feel the heat. Always the heat, waiting just beneath the surface. Waiting for the next person who doesn't understand, who doesn't respect, who treats the earth as something dead and inert instead of alive and aware. The fire spirits are patient. They've been there for thousands of years. They can wait thousands more. But their patience isn't infinite. Thomas showed me that. He showed me what they're capable of, what they're willing to do. And every time I hear about a new volcanic expedition, another research team studying active sites, I think about calling them, warning them, telling them the truth, but I never do. Because deep down, I know they wouldn't listen. They'll go anyway, with their equipment and their confidence and their complete certainty that they understand how the world works. And maybe that's how it should be. Maybe some lessons can only be learned through fire. I just hope, when they finally learn, it won't be too late for the rest of us. My name is Samuel Whitehorse, but everyone calls me Sam. I've been a park ranger for 21 years now, and 16 of those have been right here in gates of the Arctic National Park, Alaska. Some people think it's crazy to spend that much time this far north of the Arctic Circle, but this place is in my blood. My grandmother was Gwich'in, and she used to tell me stories about these mountains when I was little. Stories about spirits and old magic. I never believed them back then. I wish I still didn't. It's October 1991, and the polar night is coming soon. In a few weeks, the sun won't come up at all for months. The temperature's already hitting 20 below at night, and the aurora borealis lights up the sky like green fire. Most people have left the park by now. Smart people anyway. I'm 52 years old, never married, and I became a ranger because I wanted to protect the sacred sites my grandmother told me about. The places where my ancestors lived and died. The Arajech Peaks region where I work is nothing but jagged granite mountains and endless frozen tundra. There are no roads here, no airports, no buildings except for emergency shelters scattered across 200 miles of wilderness. If something goes wrong, you're on your own until spring. The permafrost is so deep that nothing really decomposes properly. Bodies can stay frozen for years, decades even. The call came through on my satellite communicator on October 15th. A research team from the university had been studying pre-Columbian sites in the peaks. They'd stopped checking in 3 days ago. Their last message was strange, something about impossible bone arrangements and voices in the night. The Park Service wanted me to go check on them. I contacted the tribal elders first, like I always do when something involves the old sites. That's when Elder Joseph gave me a warning that made my skin crawl. The bone walkers are awake, he said. Don't go near the arrangements, Sam. Don't touch them. Don't even look at them too long. I laughed it off. Come on, Joseph. Those are just old stories. Your grandmother knew better, he said, and hung up. I packed my gear that night, modern cold weather equipment rated to 60 below. My satellite communicator. emergency supplies. But I also packed some of the traditional items my grandmother had given me. A medicine bag, some tobacco for offerings, just in case. The helicopter dropped me at the research camp 2 days later. The pilot didn't want to wait. "Something feels wrong here," he said. "Radio when you're ready for pickup." Then he was gone, and I was alone with the wind. The camp looked normal at first. 3 tents, properly staked, equipment neatly organized. But then I noticed the food. Someone had been cooking breakfast. There was still oatmeal in a pot, half eaten, bacon on plates, coffee in cups, like they'd just stood up and walked away in the middle of eating. The excavation site was 100 yards from camp. That's when I saw my first bone arrangement. They'd formed a perfect circle, maybe 20 feet across. Human bones mixed with caribou, wolf, and bear. Skulls placed at exact intervals. Ribs laid out like spokes on a wheel. The bones were completely clean, bleached, pure white, even though some of them had to be fresh. In the center of the circle sat an open field journal. I knew I shouldn't touch anything, but I'm a ranger. Investigation is part of the job. I picked up the journal and started reading Dr. Kenneth Morrison's notes. October 10th. Discovered unusual bone formation near Site C. Arrangement too precise to be natural. Will document and study. October 11th. Bone circle has changed position overnight. I know that sounds impossible, but I measured everything yesterday. The skulls have moved. Sarah thinks I'm losing it. October 12th. We all heard it last night. Clicking sounds, like bones tapping together, coming from multiple directions. The circle is bigger now, much bigger. October 13th. They're moving. The bones move when we're not looking. Kenneth says we should leave, but we need to document this. This could be the discovery of a lifetime. October 14th. Sarah is missing. We found her sleeping bag empty this morning. There are bones arranged outside her tent in the shape of a person. Amanda is packing up. We're leaving at first light. The journal ended there. The last entry was 5 days ago. I looked up from the pages and realized something that made my stomach tight. The temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees in the few minutes I'd been reading. My breath came out in thick clouds, and there was no wind anymore. Everything was completely silent. No birds. No insects. Nothing. The bones in the circle were pointing at me now. All of them. Every single skull, every rib, every long bone, they were all oriented toward where I stood. I hadn't seen them move, but they'd definitely changed position. That's when I heard the clicking. The clicking sound came from everywhere and nowhere. Like someone tapping bones together, but the rhythm was wrong. Too fast, too organized. Almost like communication. I grabbed my radio. "Base? This is Whitehorse. I'm at the research site. Camp is abandoned. I need backup and a full search team." Static answered me. Then, through the noise, I heard clicking sounds coming through the speaker. The same clicking I heard in the air around me. "Base, do you copy?" More clicking. Then a voice, my grandmother's voice, whispered through the static. "Samuel, run." I dropped the radio. My grandmother had been dead for 3 years. The smart thing would have been to hike back to the emergency shelter and wait for the helicopter. But 3 people were missing out here, and I'm not the kind of ranger who leaves people behind. I've led over 100 wilderness expeditions. I speak 3 indigenous languages. I know how to survive in conditions that would kill most people. I've always been prepared for bears, storms, hypothermia. I wasn't prepared for this. I started searching the area around camp, looking for tracks, any sign of where the researchers had gone. The ground was frozen solid, but I found something anyway. Marks in the frost. Not footprints, drag marks. Like something had pulled bodies across the tundra. I followed them north, toward the deeper peaks. After an hour of hiking, I found the second bone arrangement. This one was different. Bigger. The bones were arranged in a spiral pattern that hurt to look at. The center seemed to pull at my eyes, making me dizzy. And scattered around the edges were personal items, a watch, a backpack, a pair of glasses. I recognized the glasses. They belonged to Dr. Morrison. The clicking started again, closer now. I spun around, but there was nothing there, just rocks and ice and the endless gray sky. But I felt watched. The hair on my neck stood up, and every instinct I had screamed at me to run. Then I saw it move. A skull at the edge of the spiral turned to face me, just rotated, smooth and slow, until its empty eye sockets locked onto mine. No wind, no animal, The bone just moved on its own. Okay, I said out loud, my voice shaking. Okay, Sam. You're tired. Low blood sugar. Maybe some carbon monoxide from the camp stove. The skull clicked, its jaw open and closed. 3 times. Like it was laughing at me. I backed away slowly, not taking my eyes off it. I'd walked maybe 10 steps when my boot hit something. I looked down. It was Dr. Kenneth Morrison. Or what was left of him. His body was arranged in the frost like one of the bone patterns. Arms spread, legs positioned just so. But he wasn't dead, not entirely. His chest moved up and down, breathing. His eyes tracked to me, wide and terrified. But he couldn't speak, couldn't move. And I could see why. His bones were visible through his skin. Not like an X-ray. I mean, I could actually see them, glowing with a faint blue light. They were moving under his flesh, shifting and rearranging. His ribs spread wider, then contracted. His finger bones extended and retracted. It was like watching his skeleton try to pull itself out of his body. Morrison's mouth moved. No sound came out, but I could read his lips. Run. The clicking surrounded me now, coming from every direction. I pulled out my satellite communicator, punched in the emergency code. The screen lit up with coordinates, but they were impossible, places that didn't exist. The map showed me standing in the middle of the Arctic Ocean, 200 miles from land. This is Ranger Whitehorse, I said into the device. I have a medical emergency at the Aerojet's research site. Dr. Morrison is alive but in critical condition. I need immediate evac. The communicator clicked at me, the same rhythm as the sounds in the air. Then it spoke in a voice that wasn't human. No help comes. Only collection. I threw the communicator into the snow and ran. I made it maybe 50 yards before I saw her. Sarah Kim, the graduate student. She was standing in the middle of the tundra, perfectly still. At first, I thought she was okay. Then I got closer. She was facing away from me, looking toward the peaks. Her arms hung at her sides. She wasn't wearing a coat, even though it had to be 30 below. I ran up to her, grabbed her shoulder to turn her around. Her body was cold as ice, frozen solid, but her eyes moved. They tracked to me, blinking slowly. She was alive somehow, frozen in place, but still conscious, still aware, and her bones were glowing through her skin, just like Morrison's had been. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and that's when I saw my first bone walker. It was shaped like a person, but it wasn't human. It was made of bones, human, animal, I couldn't tell. The bones fit together wrong, at angles that shouldn't work. Too many joints, arms that bent backwards, a skull that looked like it was made from 3 different skulls fused together. Where eyes should be, there was just blue glowing light. The same light I'd seen inside Morrison and Sarah. It walked toward me with a clicking, rattling sound. Each step perfectly balanced, perfectly controlled. Other bone walkers emerged from behind rocks, rising up from the snow itself. 5 of them, 10 more. All walking toward me with that same horrible precision. I did the only thing I could do. I ran again, leaving Sarah standing frozen in the snow, heading for the emergency shelter 3 miles east. My pack weighed me down, but I didn't dare drop it. The shelter had supplies, a radio beacon, maybe a working phone. The bone walkers didn't chase me. They didn't need to. Because everywhere I looked, there were more bone arrangements, circles, spirals, patterns that made my eyes hurt. And with each one I passed, the temperature dropped lower. The clicking got louder. I realized what was happening. They weren't chasing me. They were herding me, guiding me somewhere specific. I reached the shelter just as night fell. The aurora blazed overhead, green and purple, making the snow glow. I slammed the door behind me and threw the bolt. The shelter was designed for extreme weather, 6 inches of insulated walls, triple-paned windows, emergency supplies for 2 weeks. I checked the radio. Dead. The phone line. Dead. Even the emergency beacon wouldn't activate. Through the window, I watched the bone walkers arrange themselves outside. They formed a circle around the shelter, evenly spaced, perfectly still, watching. That's when my satellite communicator crackled to life in my pack, even though I'd thrown it away miles ago. It shouldn't even be here. The screen showed one word: collection. I was trapped, and they weren't going to let me leave. I spent the first hour searching the shelter for anything useful. There was food, water, cold weather gear, everything you'd need to survive a normal emergency. Nothing that would help against animated skeletons that shouldn't exist. The medical kit had morphine. I thought about Morrison, still breathing with his bones moving under his skin, fully aware of what was happening to him. If the bone walkers came for me, maybe I could at least make it quick. I put 2 syringes in my pocket. The bone walkers didn't move. They just stood there in their perfect circle, watching the shelter, watching me. I counted 23 of them. Every few minutes, one would tilt its head, and I'd hear that clicking sound. Then another would answer from across the circle. They were talking to each other. Around midnight, I heard a helicopter. For a moment, hope exploded in my chest. Someone had noticed the missed check-ins. They'd sent a rescue team. I ran to the window, waving my flashlight. The helicopter passed right over the shelter. Didn't slow down, didn't even turn. Like it couldn't see me at all. I grabbed the emergency flare gun and fired straight up through the roof vent. The red flare shot into the sky, bright as the sun. The helicopter kept going, disappearing into the mountains. The bone walkers all turned their heads toward me at exactly the same moment. 23 skulls, all those glowing blue eyes, all focused on the shelter. The clicking got louder. Then they started building. I watched through the window as they began arranging bones in the snow. Working together with perfect coordination, they created a new pattern. A massive spiral, with the shelter at its center. They worked fast, pulling bones from somewhere I couldn't see, laying them down with precise movements. The temperature inside the shelter started dropping. I could see my breath, thick clouds of it. The thermometer on the wall read 70 degrees, but it felt like 30. I put on every piece of cold weather gear in the shelter. It didn't help. At 2 in the morning, someone knocked on the door. 3 sharp knocks. Very polite. "Sam," a woman's voice. "Sam, it's Dr. Ironcloud. Let me in. I'm freezing out here." Dr. Lisa Ironcloud. I knew the name. Cultural anthropologist, Gwich'in, like my grandmother, expert in indigenous folklore. I'd requested her help with the tribal consultation work, but she wasn't supposed to arrive for another week. "How did you get here?" I called through the door. "Helicopter dropped me at the old camp. I saw your tracks." "Sam, please, it's 40 below out here." I looked through the window. The bone walkers hadn't moved. They were still standing in their circle, perfectly still. "What's my grandmother's name?" I asked. Silence. Then, "Martha Whitehorse. She told you stories about the bone walkers when you were 7. You didn't believe her." "You still don't believe, do you, Sam?" "Only Dr. Ironcloud would know that." I'd mentioned it in the consultation request. I opened the door. Dr. Lisa Ironcloud stood there, maybe 40 years old, wearing proper Arctic gear. She looked exhausted but alive, real, human. She rushed inside, and I slammed the door behind her. "What the hell is happening here?" I asked. She saw the bone walkers through the window and went pale. Oh no, Sam, they've started the collection." "How long have they been here?" "Hours." "What are they? What do they want?" She pulled out a notebook, flipping through pages covered in drawings and text. "They're exactly what the old stories say. Bone walkers. Spirit guardians. When sacred burial sites are disturbed, they wake up. They collect." "Collect what?" "Bones." She showed me a drawing in her notebook. It looked exactly like the bone walkers outside. They separate the bones from the living, slowly, keeping the person alive as long as possible. It's punishment for disturbing the dead. The archaeologists must have dug into a sacred site. I thought about Morrison, his bones glowing and moving under his skin. How do we stop them? "You don't stop them, Sam. You appease them. You show respect. You perform the proper rituals." She started unpacking her bag, pulling out bundles of sage, tobacco, small carved figures. "We need to do this now, before they start the collection process on us." We spent the next hour setting up the ritual. Dr. Ironcloud explained each step, speaking in Gwich'in, teaching me the words my grandmother had tried to teach me 40 years ago. We burned sage, made offerings of tobacco, sang the old songs. The bone walkers watched but didn't move. "It's not working," I said. "They're still out there." "Because we're not the ones who disturbed the site, Doctor," Ironcloud said quietly. "The archaeologists did. The debt has to be paid in full. 4 people violated the sacred ground. 4 collections must be completed. Morrison and Sarah are still alive. Maybe the fourth person got away. She shook her head. No one gets away from the Bonewalkers. Once the collection starts, it finishes. Always. That's when we heard the scratching. It came from the walls. All around us. Like fingernails, no, like bone tips scraping against the wood and insulation. The sound circled the shelter, moving from wall to wall. Then it came from above. From the ceiling? They're on the roof, I whispered. The scratching stopped. Silence. Then a single bone, a human finger bone, dropped down the roof vent and landed on the floor between us. It was perfectly clean, bleached white, and it was moving, twitching, pointing at Dr. Ironcloud. More bones started falling through the vent. Fingers, ribs, vertebrae. They landed with clicking sounds, and each one moved on its own, slowly sliding across the floor toward us. Dr. Ironcloud grabbed her bag and started pulling out more ritual items. The fourth archaeologist. Where is she? I don't know. Morrison's note said Amanda Foster was packing up. But she's in here with us, Dr. Ironcloud said. That's the only way they'd attack the shelter. She must have made it here before you did. We tore the shelter apart, searching. The bones kept falling, more and more of them, piling up on the floor. They were building something, assembling themselves into shapes. I found Amanda Foster in the supply closet. She'd wedged herself into the corner behind boxes of emergency rations. Her eyes were open, tracking me. She was breathing, but her bones were glowing so bright I could see her entire skeleton through her skin. Every bone, every joint, all of them moving. Her mouth opened. The voice that came out wasn't hers. Collection. Must. Complete. The bones on the floor had assembled themselves into 3 small bone walkers. Child-sized. They stood up and moved toward Dr. Ironcloud. She stepped backward, holding up her medicine bundle. Sam, we have to give them what they want. It's the only way. What do they want? Amanda Foster, the last one who disturbed the site. We have to put her outside. I looked at Amanda. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, but her eyes begged me not to. She was alive in there, trapped in her own body, but alive. There has to be another way, I said. The small bone walkers grabbed Dr. Ironcloud's legs. She screamed. I saw blue light spread up from where they touched her, crawling under her skin like frost on glass. Sam, she was fighting them, trying to kick free. Give them Amanda. It's her or all of us. The walls of the shelter started shaking. Through the window, I saw all 23 bonewalkers moving closer. They'd reached the walls now. The scratching was everywhere, all around us. I made a choice. Maybe it was the wrong one. I grabbed Amanda Foster and dragged her to the door. Dr. Ironcloud kept screaming. The small bonewalkers were pulling at her now, and I could see blue light spreading up her legs into her torso, her bones starting to glow. I opened the door and pushed Amanda outside into the snow. The bonewalkers converged on her immediately. I slammed the door shut and ran to help Dr. Ironcloud, but I was too late. The small bonewalkers had let go of her, but the damage was done. The blue light was inside her now, spreading through her skeleton. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. It's already started, she whispered. Outside, Amanda Foster screamed. It was a sound I'll never forget. The bonewalkers had her surrounded, and they were working on her. I could see their bony hands moving, pulling, separating. The blue light flared bright around her body. The screaming lasted for 7 minutes. I know because I watched the clock, unable to look away, unable to help. When it stopped, there was just another pile of carefully arranged bones in the snow. Another pattern for the collection. Dr. Ironcloud collapsed. I caught her, but I could feel the bones moving under her skin, shifting, rearranging. The ritual, she gasped. If you perform it correctly, or today show respect to the disturbed graves, they might let you live. They might. What about you? She smiled, sad and tired. I touch them, Sam. Once they touch you, the collection starts. Nothing stops it. But you might still have time. The bonewalkers were coming back toward the shelter. Slow, deliberate steps, all of them, moving in perfect unison. Dr. Ironcloud pressed her notebook into my hands. Read it. Learn the rituals. Find the disturbed graves and rebury them properly. It's the only way. Her bones were glowing brighter now. I could see them moving faster, pulling at her flesh from the inside. She was shaking, fighting it, but I knew she couldn't win. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be. Just don't let them make me into one of their collections. When it's finished, scatter my bones, send me home properly. The bone walkers reached the door. I heard them, arranging themselves outside, preparing. Dr. Ironcloud stood up, her body moving in ways bodies shouldn't move. The bones were taking control. Go out the back, she whispered. Run, don't look back. Then she walked to the door and opened it. The bone walkers took her gently, almost respectfully. They knew she was already claimed. I watched through the window as they laid her down in the snow and began the collection process. I couldn't watch. I grabbed Dr. Ironcloud's notebook and went out the back emergency exit while they were distracted. The temperature hit me like a wall, 60 below at least, but I ran anyway. Ran into the darkness with only the aurora to light my way. Behind me, Dr. Ironcloud started screaming. I ran for 3 hours through the frozen darkness. The aurora painted everything in green and purple light, making the snow look alien, unreal. Behind me, the clicking sounds followed, always just out of sight. The bone walkers were hunting, but they weren't rushing. They didn't need to. There was nowhere to run. I finally stopped at a rock outcropping, my lungs burning from the cold. I pulled out Dr. Ironcloud's notebook and started reading by flashlight. The pages were filled with Gwich'in legends, drawings, maps. She'd been researching the bone walkers for years. According to her notes, they were ancient guardians, placed at sacred burial sites to protect the dead from disturbance. When someone violated these sites, digging, excavating, removing remains, the bone walkers woke up. They would collect the bones of the violators, adding them to the arrangements, using them to strengthen the protection of the site. But there was a way to stop them. Maybe. The bone walkers serve the ancestors, Dr. Ironcloud had written. They act on behalf of the disturbed dead. If the proper respect is restored, if the graves are properly blessed and the bones returned with ceremony, the collection may end. But all violators must be accounted for first. All violators. Morrison, Sarah, Amanda, and Dr. Foster were gone. That meant the debt was paid. The collection should be complete, unless the bone walkers counted me as a violator too. I'd walked on the sacred ground, touched the arrangements, disturbed the evidence. Even if I hadn't meant to desecrate anything, maybe that didn't matter to spirits that were thousands of years old. The clicking sounds got closer. I looked up and saw them coming over the rocks, 5 bone walkers, moving in perfect formation. Their blue eyes locked onto me. They were tall, 7, 8 feet, made from bones that couldn't possibly support that height. But they moved anyway, joints bending at angles that made me dizzy to watch. I pulled out Dr. Ironcloud's medicine bundle and started the ritual she'd described, speaking words in Gwich'in that my grandmother had tried to teach me, offering tobacco to the 4 directions, asking forgiveness for disturbing the sacred ground. The bone walkers stopped. They stood in a semicircle around me, just watching, waiting. I kept going, my voice shaking from cold and fear. The ritual took 30 minutes. When I finished, I stood up and faced them. I didn't mean to disturb your rest, I said. I came to help. I came to protect. I honor the ancestors. I honor the old ways. One of the bone walkers stepped forward. It was bigger than the others. Its skull more elaborate, decorated with carved patterns that glowed with that blue light. It reached out one bony hand toward me. I didn't move. If they were going to take me, running wouldn't help. The bone walker's hand stopped inches from my chest. It tilted its head, studying me. Then it pulled back and gestured toward the north. The other bone walkers parted, creating a path. They were showing me something, telling me to go north. I went. What else could I do? They led me through the peaks for another hour. We walked in silence except for the clicking. They were still communicating, but the sound was different now. Softer, less threatening, like they were discussing something. We came to a valley I'd never seen before, even though I'd mapped this region for 16 years. The GPS on my emergency locator put me in a place that didn't exist on any of my maps. The valley was full of bones, thousands of them, maybe millions, all carefully arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. Circles within, spirals within, geometries that shouldn't exist in 3 dimensions. In the center of it all was a cave mouth. The bone walkers stopped at the edge of the bone field and pointed. I understood. This was the source, the original sacred site. The The place the archaeologists had disturbed somehow, maybe by digging too close, maybe by touching something they shouldn't have. I walked into the valley alone. The bones crunched under my boots. With each step, I felt the temperature drop. By the time I reached the cave, it was easily 100 below. My skin was going numb. My lungs burned with every breath. Inside the cave, I found what they wanted me to see. The archaeologists had found this place. I could see their excavation marks, their measurement stakes, their tags. They'd been carefully removing bones from the cave, cataloging them, preparing to take them back to the university for study. They'd removed maybe 24 skeletons. 12 adults, 12 children, all Gwich'in, all buried with ceremony and care, hundreds or thousands of years ago. The empty spaces where the bones had been were like wounds in the earth, but the bones were still here. The archaeologists hadn't taken them yet. They were piled in the corner, tagged and numbered, waiting for transport that would never come. I understood what I had to do. I spent the next 6 hours reburying those bones. Using my hands, digging into the frozen earth, placing each skeleton back where it belonged. I didn't have the proper ceremonies. I didn't have the right tools. But I did the best I could, speaking the words my grandmother had taught me, honoring each person whose rest had been disturbed. The bone walkers watched from the cave entrance, silent, waiting. When I placed the last skull back in its grave, something changed. The blue light in the bone walker's eyes flickered and faded. The clicking sounds stopped. One by one, they began to collapse. Not falling, disassembling. The bones that made up their bodies separated, gently settling into new arrangements on the valley floor, becoming part of the sacred patterns. Within 10 minutes, all the bone walkers were gone. Just bones again. Just remains, properly arranged and at rest. The temperature started rising, slowly, but I could feel it. The wrongness in the air lifted. The pressure that had been pushing on my chest since I'd first seen the bone circles eased. I walked out of the valley as the sun finally rose above the horizon. After weeks of twilight, the dawn felt like a miracle. My satellite communicator crackled to life. Real voices this time. Human voices. The search team had finally found my signal. I was rescued 8 hours later. By then, I was deep into hypothermia, barely conscious. They told me later I kept mumbling about bones and spirits and debts that had to be paid. They found me 70 miles from where I should have been, in a valley that wasn't on any maps. The rescue team asked how I'd gotten there. I told them I walked. They didn't believe me. The distance was impossible in that amount of time. But the GPS logs didn't lie. The official report said the archaeologists died from exposure and wildlife attacks. No one mentioned the bone arrangements. No one talked about the bodies I'd found or the condition they were in. The whole incident was quietly classified, the excavation site permanently closed. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital. Frostbite, hypothermia, exhaustion. But the physical damage wasn't the worst part. I kept seeing Dr. Ironcloud's face in my dreams, hearing her screams. Morrison's glowing bones. Sarah frozen in the snow. Amanda's eyes begging me not to open that door. The Park Service offered me counseling, medical leave, early retirement with full benefits. Instead, I quit. I couldn't be a ranger anymore. Not after what I'd seen, not after understanding what my grandmother had tried to tell me all those years ago. The spirits are real, the old ways matter, and there are places that should be protected, not from nature, but from people who don't understand what they're touching. I moved back to my grandmother's village, started working with the tribal elders, learning the ceremonies properly, learning how to identify sacred sites, how to protect them, how to perform the rituals that keep the guardians at peace. The Arajech Peaks region is off limits now, officially because of environmental concerns. But the elders know the truth. The bone walkers are still there, still watching, still protecting. The archaeologists' equipment is still at the old camp, exactly where they left it. No one will go retrieve it. No one is brave enough or foolish enough to disturb that place again. I get letters sometimes from other rangers in other parks. Strange things happening near indigenous burial sites. Bones arranged in impossible patterns. Clicking sounds in the night. They ask for advice. I tell them the same thing every time. Leave it alone. Show respect. If you've disturbed something, put it back and do it properly. Some of them listen, some don't. Last month, I heard about a research team in Canada that disappeared near a Haida burial site. They found the bodies 3 weeks later, all the bones carefully removed and arranged in traditional patterns. The official report blamed animals. I know better. The bone walkers aren't just in Alaska. They're everywhere. Sacred ground has been consecrated, everywhere ancestors sleep and need protection. They've been there for thousands of years, and they'll be there for thousands more. And they're patient, so very patient, because they understand something we've forgotten. The dead deserve respect. They deserve peace. And if you disturb that peace, there's a price to be paid. I think about Dr. Ironclad sometimes, about her sacrifice. I scattered her bones like she asked, in a place the bone walkers would approve of. A place of honor, with proper ceremony. I hope she's at rest. I also think about the expression on the lead bone walker's face, if you can call it a face, when it saw me performing the burial ritual. It wasn't angry, it was satisfied, like I'd finally understood the lesson, like I'd proven I could be trusted. Sometimes, late at night, I hear clicking sounds outside my cabin. Just brief bursts, then silence. I'm not scared anymore. I think they're checking on me, making sure I remember, making sure I keep my word to protect the sacred places. I always leave tobacco by the door now, an offering, a sign of respect. The clicking sounds always stop after I do that. And in the morning, the tobacco is gone. My name is Samuel Whitehorse, and I used to be a park ranger. Now I'm something else, a keeper of old knowledge, a bridge between the world we see and the world we've forgotten, a reminder that some places are sacred and some debts must always be paid. The bone walkers are still out there, still collecting, still protecting, and I make sure no one disturbs them again.